Good morning, fourth graders. Today we are on page 249 of your student journal, page 249. And our objective today is, today I will convert decimals to fractions and plot them on a number line, period. So today I will convert decimals to fractions and plot them on a number line. So what we're doing today is we're continuing to explore that relationship between fractions and decimals. That's really what we're going to be working on, is continuing to see the relationship between fractions and decimals. Okay, so let's look at our vocabulary. Our first word says decimal point, a symbol, and it shows you the symbol used to separate a whole number from fractional parts. So we separate the wholes from the fractions. So this is a 0, the decimal point, and then the parts. Then we have convert, to change form without changing value. So in our last few lessons, we were converting from from fractions to decimals, and now we're going from decimals to fractions, but again, we're not going to change the value. And then plot means to represent a value on a number line. Okay, so our steps are, we're going to say the decimal, convert the decimal to a fraction, and then plot the fraction on a number line. And they're going to be providing us with place value charts that could also help us. Okay, so I'm going to get started on my first one. And my first one is, what is 2/10 as a fraction? Okay, and if I wanted to write this into my place value chart, I see 0, decimal 2. I see that this is read as 2/10. Now, I've said we could also read this as 0 and 2/10 because this decimal, the way that we say it is and. So it could be 0 and 2/10, or I could just read this, because this is a 0, I could just say 2/10. So when you say the decimal, you hear the fraction in it, 2/10. So I hear the 2/10, which tells me that those are equivalent. Okay, they then want me to plot 2/10 on a number line. Well, I see my number line 0 and 1. And if I look at the large partitions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I could say this is 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, and 9/10. So 2/10 would be right here, right there on the line. Okay, let's see another one. Here is my next one. This says, what is 53/100 as a fraction? Okay, and they also provide this to help us. So I have 0, decimal, 5, 3. So if you weren't sure how to read this, you could use this. So how do I read this? 53/100. So when I say the decimal, I hear the fraction. So 53/100. So I hear 53/100, which tells me that these are equivalent. This is 53/100, and this is 53/100. Sometimes when I don't have a place value chart, what I like to write is I like to write them in. So this is my tenths, and that's my hundredths. So I would know it's 53/100. Okay, so they want me to plot 53/100 on my number line. Well, that's 0 and that's 1, but if I'm doing hundredths, I'm going to go by my little lines. So that would be 10 hundredths, that would be 20 hundredths, 30 hundredths, 40 hundredths, 50 hundredths, 60 hundredths, 70 hundredths, 80 hundredths, 90 hundredths, and 1 would be 100 over 100. Because whenever your numerator and denominator is the same, it's 1. Okay, so 53 hundredths would be 50 plus 1, 2, 3. So 53 hundredths is going to be right there. A little bit more than 50, but not at 60. Okay, boys and girls, let's do some together. We are on page 250. On page 250. And here's our first problem. It says, what is 8/10 as a fraction? And again, if you didn't know that, you could put that in here. So 0.8. And that tells you it's 8/10. So when I say the decimal 8/10, I hear the fraction 8/10. So I know that 8/10 is equal to 8/10. They're equivalent. Okay, but they want us to plot this. So 8/10, if we're doing tenths, that means we're using our large partition. So that's 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10, and 1 is equivalent to 10/10. So 8/10 would just be right there, perfectly on the line. It's great that they sound the same, so it's easy to match them. Okay, let's check this next one. This says, what is, and I know this is 47 hundredths as a fraction, but if you didn't know, you could put it in here, 0.47. And then you'd see when you read it, it's 47 hundredths. Because we read the last place value. So 47 hundredths. Okay, if it's 47 hundredths, you hear the fraction, 47 hundredths, which tells me those are equivalent. Okay, so if we're doing hundredths, we're going to be using the little partitions. So if I'm using the little ones, I know to here it was broke up to 10 hundredths. And that's 20 hundredths. That line would be 30 hundredths, 40 hundredths, 50 hundredths, 60 hundredths, 70 hundredths, 80 hundredths, 90 100ths, and this would be 100 over 100. Okay, so where would 47 be? Here's 40, that would be 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47 is going to be right